Hello, Hero Collectors here. How's it going, everybody? Hope you all are doing fantastic. I know I am, and today we're going to be taking a look at these three Mandalorian-related Black Series figures. We have Grief Carga from Mandalorian Season 2. We have Mando and his Glavis Ringworld, I believe is the designation of this particular figure. And then we have Migs Mayfield from Season 1 of The Mandalorian. We're going to start with... We'll go with Grief, then Migs, then Mando. Starting off with Grief Carga here, just get it out of the way, I was gifted this figure from Summit City Spidey, who picked it up at Ollie's for 10 bucks. So I might not have as harsh opinions on this figure as is. In fact, this figure kind of surprised me, but we will get into that in a minute. First up, you can see the head sculpt looking pretty good likeness to Carl Weathers, I'd say. It's not perfect, but for a 1/12 scale figure, I think it's pretty decent. You can see the gray in his beard and the hair continues onto the back. You can just see the back of the cloak now. While we're here, it's just got one real line detail, I guess two technically, but then it's got all this. You can't really fold it up a ton to see the back of the figure, but you can see the rest of the figure here. He's got kind of like a red undershirt and a tunic. Comes down to a skirt, some brown pants, some black boots. He's got a holster, mustard yellow on the inside. He's got some gloves, both trigger finger hands. I'll get into articulation here in a minute. My biggest problem with this cloak is what I think a lot of people have a problem with is this little middle piece here. When he's just kind of standing vanilla, it tends to bow, and if you kind of cross the body with the arms, it gets worse. But I found when kind of doing dynamic poses, it stretched out like this and looked pretty good. When posing, it wasn't as big of a problem, but when just standing there, it is a bit of a problem, in my opinion. Let's have some gold on the belt, but there is the holster, like I mentioned, and this is getting into the only real accessory, which is a blaster for the figure, and it fits just fine in both of the hands. No real comparisons with this guy, because I don't have any of the other previous Grief Carga figures, and you just saw him compared to the Mando, so I don't think it really matters doing a comparison for this guy. So let's just go ahead and get into articulation so he can look up that far. I think he's got a double ball, one at the base of the head, or at the top of the neck, and at the base of the neck. And he can look down about that far. Chin runs into the little band across the chest. Can tilt side to side, and of course 360 all the way around. Shoulders can go up about that high, runs into the cloak, as you can see. He can go down, he can go forward, he can go back. You can do a 360, but it's got to be at an angle like this, because again, runs into the cloak, which I actually kind of had hiked up, but if you have it down further, it restricts it even more if you are trying to keep it as flush as possible. He's got a bicep single joint there, and I can go that far, and that has a swivel there. There is no cut at the gloves. It is all one molded part with the forearm. So he has no articulation there, but his hands do hinge up or side to side for wielding the gun, which I think is nice. His torso, it's a ball at the waist, so you can get back a little bit. Again, cloak runs into it, and then forward just a little bit. You can do side to side. Again, cloak is in the way, and he can do a full 360 that way. He has hips that go out that far. He has thigh cut, and he can kick forward. The skirt does get out of the way a little bit of back, and then he has a single jointed knee. Can't quite kick his own butt. I think he just gets 90 degrees, and that's it. No boot swivel. Ankle or foot can go down that far. Can go up a little bit, or actually quite a bit. I'm looking at it, and he can pivot that far. This leg that has the holster, it's not super hindered. It's loose around the leg, so you can still get the articulation you want. So, with all that being said, what are my final thoughts on this Grief Carga figure? So with this Grief Carga figure, I think my biggest complaint is the cloak. It restricts articulation a ton, and at least does not look very good at the top with the collar. There are ways to potentially fix it, and I may end up doing that, like tucking kind of the cloak behind him in a way, or manipulating it a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to improve it, but I do want to take steps to make it look better on the figure overall. But that's my only serious complaint, you know, aside from some articulation points that he could have had, like boot swivel and a cut at the gloves. It ultimately doesn't really affect my experience with this figure. In fact, I was afraid he was going to be a real traffic cone of a figure, but I did have fun posing him around and did get some kind of dynamic poses, you know, dynamic for this figure's limitations. It's not perfect by any means, and I mainly got this to world build the Mandalorian part of my collection, not really to be a super dynamic figure. So, with all that considered, I think it's fine. It's not great. I can take it up to the good rating, but it's not like great or perfect or anything like that. I think that there are some improvements to be made, but for the purposes of my collection and my shelf, he's going to be just fine as is. Does he have the fun factor? Yes and no. I'm going to lean more towards no just because of the cloak kind of being finicky. He was fun to pose, but the cloak part of it just was a hindrance and did affect the experience. So what's my final rating for him? I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10. If you can find him at Ollie's for $10, I think it's worth it. If you are more crucial for articulation, even for a character like Grief, I don't know if it's really going to be as satisfying, but to just kind of fill that character slot on my display, I think it's perfect. Okay, getting into the Migs figure, you can see the face sculpt right there. I think it's looking pretty good. There's just a little bit of, I don't know, when I'm looking at it from kind of like a top view, like looking down at this angle, it doesn't quite look like the actor, but when I get to like this angle, it looks a lot better in my opinion. But otherwise, the rest of the figure is all covered in straps and holsters and stuff. He's also got blue undershirt, some kind of brown shirt with some texturing to it. Come on to the back, more straps and stuff. I'll get into the accessories here in a minute. Some blue pants, some boots. So yeah, trigger finger hands on both sides, and there's a reason for that. So might as well just go ahead and get into the accessories, which first off, he has 4 of these guns, which are all painted the same. They've kind of got like a really dark gunmetal color and then some brown on the hilt of the gun or the handle. I don't know what you'd want to call it. But yeah, he has 4 of those. 2 on the chest, as you can see, 1 and 2. And then he's got 1 in each holster on his leg, which the pants do have some pocket detailing on the sides there, belt buckle. And then on the back, he has this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's a back-mounted gun. It can raise up like that. That's part of the articulation of it. You can see it's all kind of one base color with a little bit of paint here at the handle or the hilt. Again, and it just ports onto his back. Through this strap, there's a hole on the strap and on the back of the figure, so you have to line those up for it to sit pretty well. But admittedly, it does not sit as well as I would like it to. Like, it ports in there, but after a while it just kind of comes loose and you can kind of see it wobbling there, and eventually it will fall out. But right now it's just held onto the strap, and you can see how loose it is right there. So I just tried to keep it like that, and it does look like he's hunched ever so slightly. But yeah, other than that, the figure looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and get into the articulations. We'll tuck that back and have everything on him just for this segment so we can look up that far. There is a little bit of movement at the base of the neck, but not very much. So we can look down that far. And there goes the back gun. Head goes that side. And then the other side can turn a full 360. Shoulders go up that high and do a full rotation that way. He's got the bicep single joint, and he can also get some rotation out of that. All of the hands, both of the hands, I should say. I'm used to doing Marvel Legends where they have multiple hands. These 2 hands hinge side to side for guns. He can go back that far, forward a little bit, but again, if the back gun hadn't already fallen off, it probably would have by now. And then you get some little bit of tiltage, and then he can twist a little bit which is nice because he does not have a waist swivel, so you can't really twist him there. Hips can go out that far, even with the holsters. He can go kick out that far and that far. Again, not really hindered, but I would be careful just because this is a thinner rubber material, so I can see that kind of wearing and tearing over time if you really have it in those positions. A thigh cut there, and he has single jointed knee, which only gets about 90, and then he has a rotation at that knee as well. No boot cut, but his feet can go down. They do go up quite a bit, and he does have some pivot. So, what are my final thoughts on Migs Mayfield? So, again, like with Grief Carga, this figure was more to fill out my Mandalorian corner of my display. I really liked Migs as a character in the show. I liked how he went from kind of a, not really a villain, but not somebody you could trust in the first season. But then in the second season, you get some real character depth with him. And I really do appreciate that. And this figure does capture him pretty well, but I will say it's not super dynamic in a sense, in that he has guns, and that's really all he uses, so you're only doing gun poses, and you don't really get blast effects with this figure, so there's no, like, thing to make each gun its own. So in posing, you just kind of have to make it look a little bit different here and there, but it's all the same guns, so there's no variation there. But that's, of course, a trait of the character. The figure does feel a little squat, in a sense. Like, maybe it's just all the straps and stuff, but his legs seem super short, and his torso seems a little short as well. It just feels like something's off in the proportions. I maybe should have looked at some reference just to make sure if that's actually accurate, but otherwise, it's good. It's got some good texture, it's got some good color. I like the head, I like the guns. It's a serviceable figure. And like Grief, I bought him at Ollie's. I personally bought him. I was not gifted the figure for $10. So for over half off, I don't feel too bad about getting this figure for what he is, which is mainly just a world builder. So does he have the fun factor? I'm going to say no. While I did take some good photos, in my opinion, they were harder to make, like, fun in a sense. Like, in all of them, he was just pointing the guns the same way. I didn't have enough, like, variety to really do a lot of fun shots, in my opinion. So I don't think he has the fun factor, but it's still a decent figure. So what's my final rating on him? I think he's going to be a 6 out of 10. He needed a little bit more to, I don't know, spice it up a little bit. This could have been an opportunity to create some blast effects that kind of port into these small guns, but there's no ports, there's no hole. I can't even put a Marvel Legends blast effect on it. So I think it is a fine, serviceable Migs figure, but it is not nearly as fun as he potentially could have been. Now, of course, saving the best for last, we have the Mando figure, Ninjar, and from, I think this is the Book of Boba Fett. It's the Glavis Ringworld release. I don't remember exactly. I need to rewatch the show. But you can see all his nice shiny colors. If you do want to see a comparison between this figure and the old shiny Mandos that's on the old body mold, go to my unboxing video. I'll try to leave a link at some point during this segment to go check that out, because I did do a comparison in that video, but I'm not going to do one here. So, just taking a look at him, nice and shiny, all brand new sculpt. I love all the armor bits, and out of the box, the wrist armor pieces were flipped the wrong way around. It is something you can fix. I thought mine were stuck, but eventually I did get them to rotate. You can see the nice helmet shape, which I guess is far more accurate than the old one, and it does look really good. He has this cloth cape. Now, I do have the jetpack on him, so it's not laying the way I would really want it to. You can see the jetpack is all nice and shiny, and it doesn't really have any color variation. It's all one color. But I don't always have that on him, so I like to kind of do this with the cape, and it lays a little bit better in my opinion. And again, no wires, but I do like the bits of detail here where it's kind of looks like it's roughed up. See on the back, that. He has ports for those. I think that's a port for his rifle, which he does not come with in this figure. And he's got the marking of his clan, details on the hands, got the belts and the straps and the shiny bits. There is a hook there for one of the accessories. I will get to that in a minute. Some blues, some tans down here, some browns, some more blues, some black, some silver, all the colors. And he's got some more details on those. So yeah, let's get into the accessories. So he's got his gun, his blaster right there, nice gunmetal color, and a little bit of tan brown on the hilt. And then down here, which took me forever to find where the sheath was. You can see in the video, I did not realize where it was until way later, but there is his little knife. That just ports right back in there. We saw the jetpack already, but then the only other accessory that isn't on the figure currently is the Darksaber, which I think is much better than the previous Darksaber that came with a Mando figure. I like the white instead of the kind of translucent black color. The black on the middle of this one is kind of spotty in a few areas. I don't know if that's just from the packaging. And the hilt is all one color. But you can remove the blade and just kind of hook the Darksaber here on his person if you want to. I personally will not be equipping this with Mando. I'm going to give it to my Season 7 Darth Maul. But let's put this back on there. And, of course, he can wield it in either hand. Did I do that wrong? I might have done that wrong. I think I put it in wrong. Let's see. No, I put it in right. Okay. It's just the way. Okay, yeah, there. That is right. So there is him holding the Darksaber. So let's remove that. And let's go over our articulation. With the jetpack, he would have a little bit more hindrance going backwards, but we're going to do that without the jetpack. So looking up, he can look that far, which I think is really good. He does have, I think, a double ball for the neck. So one at the head, one at the base of the neck. He can look down quite a bit. He is expressive, so he can do this. In the show, he really does get that expression going because, you know, he can't see his face, so he has to use his helmet and head as an expression. So he can turn his head that way, full 360. The arms can go up that far, and he can rotate, I believe, a full 360. I will say the shoulder pads, they have the ring system to where it's a ring around the peg that goes into the shoulder, and it does not want to seem to really rotate as of right now, but I know the arms can rotate. Let's see if this one, nope, shoulder pad, still the same deal, but the arm can rotate, and then we can just kind of readjust the shoulder pad back in place. So just keep that in mind. He does have some butterflies, which go forward and back a bit. Bicep single joint, and he gets some rotation there. Again, we went over that these can actually rotate at the wrist. So you can see that rotate a little bit. Hands hinge up and down. Actually, that one hinges up and down. This one hinges side to side for the gun and kind of the Darksaber. So the torso can, let's see, crunch forward, and not very much. And then he can crunch back a little bit. He gets some side to side, and of course he can rotate a bit. Sorry, I did not have that centered. It seems like this little gray piece is attached to the belt, and then it's just kind of under the torso that goes over the kind of midsection here. If you can kind of see that a bit. And then hips can go out that far, and you can kind of see it lift up the skirt. He does have a kick forward, not much back. He does have a thigh cut there. Knees are single jointed and only get to 90. And then he can point his foot down, up only a tiny bit, and has ankle rotation. There is no boot swivel because the swivel at the knee. So what are my final thoughts on this Mandalorian figure? This Mando figure is very satisfying. So for the longest time, I thought I was okay with the previous Mando, and I still own the previous Mando, the one that first released with the silver after we had the original Season 1 look where he didn't have the Beskar armor. I kept thinking, you know, I don't need the new one, I don't need the new one, I don't need the new one. I kept seeing reviews and photos, and eventually I just cracked and finally ordered it. And I was a fool. I genuinely was a fool. This figure is so much better in so many ways. The proportions threw me off a little bit at first, but I kind of grew into it a bit and adjusted it to it, and I think this definitely works better than the first figure. The armor is so nice and shiny, and I love it. It captures the shininess of the armor without having to be vac metal. The cape, I could take or leave. I think it's fine. It lays pretty well. It's mainly the corner of the chest that bothers me. It just doesn't always want to stay tucked in there. Otherwise, it's not really a problem. The accessories are all great. The only misstep was maybe that he didn't include his rifle, but even then, I have an extra rifle, so I'm good. I didn't necessarily need it. I like the knife, I like the gun, the dark saber is great. Like I said, I'm not going to equip that with this figure, but I think it is a much better improvement. So I have mostly nothing but good things to say. Like, all my minor qualms are, again, just minor. They don't really affect my experience with the figure, so I would say I'm very positive overall about this Mando. Does he have the fun factor? Absolutely. You're seeing the pictures right now, and I had a blast taking these. They were a lot of fun. I don't really have any complaints with how they turned out. I think the experience of taking the photos and seeing how they turned out was very positive, so I had a blast. He does have the fun factor. Then finally, what's the rating? I'm going to say a 9 out of 10. He's not perfect, but he is pretty damn great. And if you are wanting a Black Series Mandalorian, I highly recommend this figure. I know there was a Mando from, I think it was season 3, I can't remember, that's the same body mold, but with a plastic cape. If you do have the preferred preference of plastic over cloth, that one would still probably stand up against this figure. I would say if you don't have a preference of cloth or plastic, go with the cloth. Try to track it down because you then have the option of equipping the jetpack or not. All right, and that was my review of these 3 Black Series Mandalorian related figures. Let me know what you think of the figures down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of the review. While you're down there, make sure you like the video and subscribe because I will have a few more Black Series videos coming in the near future. So make sure you are on the lookout for that. With all that out of the way, I will talk to you all in another video, another post, another time.